this video, I will be making grapefruit cake from Delicious Disney Walt Disney World, Recipes and Stories from the Most Magical Place on Earth by Pam Brandon, published in 2021. I'm going to be starting a pop culture playlist with a few recipes from cookbooks geared towards particular fandoms, in addition to my normal videos, and this is the first in that series. Grapefruit cake is actually the signature dessert at the Hollywood Brown Derby restaurant in Hollywood Studios at Walt Disney World. The recipe in the cookbook shows how to make a dumbed down version of what is served in the restaurant, but is essentially a good recipe that just needs some technical tweaks to make the restaurant version, which this video will show. The cookbook actually shows the correct presentation of the cake. The instructions don't necessarily match the picture that's in the book. I get why they chose to do that, as the book recipe is the same flavor. It just is easier for a home cook that may not be a pastry chef or someone who bakes a whole lot. The main difference is the number of cake layers you slice and the use of a grapefruit or orange syrup rather than putting grapefruit slices as part of the filling, as well as a candied orange garnish to finish the cake. Disney cookbooks can be kind of hit or miss. I find the ones centered around the parks rather than the movies are better quality recipes that make better results. The Galaxy's Edge cookbook is another one that has some really good recipes in it. The cookbooks that are based off of like the Encanto cookbook or there's always some good recipes in them, but they just overall don't seem to be quite as good in my opinion. So if you're a Disney fan that wants some of your favorite flavors from things like the Epcot Food and Wine Festival, from your favorite restaurants, then you might want to pick this one up. It's got some good recipes in it, and I'll probably cook from it again. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and hop in. Here is the setup for our Hollywood Brown Derby grapefruit cake. We need whole grapefruits. I chose ruby red just to sort of stay on brand with them. Egg, lemon. This is grapefruit juice. Indian River, if you're in Florida, is a really good brand. So if you see it in a grocery store, I would pick that up. Canola or vegetable oil, cake flour, baking powder, cream of tartar, confectioner's sugar, cream cheese, and regular sugar. And there's not a ton of ingredients, but there are a ton of steps. Like I said, we're going to make this slightly different. And there is one garnish that I'll use at the end, which is some candied orange slices just to make it look pretty on the top. But that is entirely optional. They don't always have it when you go to the restaurant. Sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. So, all right, let's go ahead and get started. All right, the first thing we're going to do is make our cake batter and bake the cake. So let's get started with that. We're just going to... This is our cake flour. We're going to go ahead and get this in our mill, and we're going to sift it so that we get any bits or clumps out, and we end up with a nice smooth cake batter. Don't start just cranking like super hard when you're filling up a mill like this either, because you'll end up with flour going everywhere. Once you get it going and you get the levels down a little bit, then you can increase the speed. Okay. All right, now we're going to get our baking powder here. And we'll put in a little bit of salt. And we can go ahead and put in sugar as well. just mix all that together so that it becomes a nice mixed set of powder here. All right. Now we're going to put some of our wet ingredients. We did separate our egg yolks and egg whites here. The egg whites we're going to use here in a minute, but the egg yolks we can go ahead and put in. We can also put in our oil. And we're going to put in about 3 tablespoons of grapefruit juice at this point. Okay. And now we're just going to blend this all together until it all sort of forms a smooth batter. Now this is still going to be, you can see it coming together already, but it's going to be dry at this point because we have not finished putting all of our wet ingredients into this cake batter. We're going to have to whip those egg whites to stiff peaks and then add them to the cake batter as well, which will make this more of a runny cake batter. And we actually don't want to overbeat it right now anyway. We just kind of want to make sure we get all the dry ingredients incorporated. So, okay. All right, that's good for now. I'll see you at the electric stand mixer. Oh, I'm sorry. And we can go ahead and put our lemon zest in at this point as well, just for a little bit of extra citrusy flavor. Sorry about that. I'll do one more swirl to get that sort of mixed in, but it'll get mixed in more when we add the whipped egg whites. So, okay, I'll see you at the stand mixer. All right, nothing fancy here. We're just gonna whip these egg whites. If you've done any amount of baking, you've probably done this before. So we just put our egg whites in. For anyone who's unaware, you don't ever want the protein, I believe it's the protein in the egg yolks, will make it so that they don't whip into stiff peaks. So that's why you have to separate the yolks and the whites to get the sort of consistency you want. And then we're gonna put about 1/4 teaspoon of cream of tartar in here as well. And then you can whip it on fairly high speed, but I'm not gonna make you watch that. I'm gonna go ahead and whip it and I'll show you what the final result looks like. Okay, you can see stiff peaks, right? It doesn't move, nice and stiff. So that's the level you wanna get it to. If it's not there, then just keep on letting it go until it gets there. But we're gonna go ahead and fold these egg whites in cream of tartar into our batter here. And like I said, that will help loosen this up into a more, it's not going to be as you know, it's not going to be as liquidy as cake batter that you get from like a box mix, I don't think. But it should be a lot looser than it currently is. And that's also why I'm trying to get as much of these egg whites out as I can. Okay. And now we're just gonna get these mixed in here. There we go. They're starting to loosen up already. And I'm not using the beater on this step because, again, this is another one of these, like, you don't want to overbeat. You don't want to overbeat your cake batter and end up with a super dense cake batter. You want it to be uniform, but you don't want to go nuts with it. There it goes. It kind of takes a little bit of muscle to get it going here. By the way, if you ever, I am self-admittedly a little bit of a amusement park nerd, not just Disney, not like a Disney adult that just does Disney all the time. Although because I live in Florida, I do go, my friends and I usually go for Halloween Horror Nights every year and we do a whole theme park trip. But sit down dinners at Disney can be pretty good. You just have to do a little research to see which restaurants are really worth it or not. I really enjoy the Hollywood Brown Derby and actually think that their Their entrees are pretty good, but I actually think that their desserts are some of the best. Their baked Alaska dessert, which they started during I believe they started it during the 50th anniversary of Disney World, and then they've kept it on the menu. Definitely worth an order if you happen to be at Disney World or if you happen to be at Hollywood Studios. Okay, that actually did end up coming out pretty liquid here. All right, so I went ahead and greased a 9-inch cake pan, and I preheated the oven to 350 degrees. So here is our cake pan. And we'll just get all this batter out and in. Come on, the last little bit doesn't want to come out. There we go. All right. And we'll mix this up a little bit too, so that doesn't end up being a different consistency from the rest of the cake. Alrighty, and that is the cake base for our grapefruit cake. And I'm gonna go pop this in the oven for about 25 to 30 minutes. As with all cakes, it can depend on your oven and how hot it bakes and all sorts of other stuff like that. Just make sure you keep an eye on it starting at about the 25-minute mark, and then when it looks done, there's no jiggle in it, or if you use the method of sticking a toothpick or a skewer into it, make sure it comes out clean, and if it does, then your cake is good to go. All right, our cake has finished baking. It's nice and solid all the way through, no jiggles. So we're gonna let it cool. We're gonna cut it and do some stuff with it, and you don't want to do that while it's still hot. So you want to let this cool completely to room temperature, and I will see you when we get to that point. While the cake is cooling, we're going to make one variation to what's in the cookbook here, but that mimics what you actually get in the restaurant, which is to make a simple grapefruit syrup. And you can make any sort of syrup out of essentially fruit juice, and the ratio is 1 cup of fruit juice per ½ cup of sugar, and you just put it in a pot and you boil it. So we're going to put 2 cups of grapefruit juice. And since I put 2 cups of grapefruit juice, I will put 1 cup of sugar. And you're going to want to stir pretty regularly so that it doesn't burn, because sugar will burn. And I'm going to turn the heat down just a little bit. You want it to be enough, and sugar will melt even just in a normal hot temperature. So you want it to reduce and become a thick syrup, and that also is going to need to cool before we use it on the cake. So I'm going to let this go ahead and cook and reduce, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. All right, we're going to see if I can get 4 layers, because that's the way it's made in the restaurant, out of this cake. It has cooled, and you want to be on a flat surface when you're doing this. I'm going to trim off the hard outer rind after I get my layers, so I think I can cheat a little bit and get a layer out of the dome on the top. Maybe, we'll see. If not, then we'll go with 3. Almost there for... All right, there's the dome. Let's see. You want to keep your head down level when you get to this part here, and you want to be really precise and with your movements. And you want to take your time with this. You want to go slow, and because these layers could potentially be, in fact, I'm sure they will be quite fragile, especially when they're this thin. So you want to stay level. You want to take your time. If it takes a few extra minutes, that's fine. It's better than messing up and having to make a new cake. Ooh, see, that's not good. We'll see what happens here. Okay. This is a very thin layer. Is it all the way? Okay. All right. Again, super, super fragile, so be very careful with it. And then I'll do one more. This one should be slightly easier. All right. Okay, I got my 4 layers here. So now I'm going to go get our icing and get our glaze here, and I will be back. All right, we're going to make our icing for the cake. Simple start. We just put the cream cheese in the mixing bowl, and we're just going to beat it until it gets whipped and is soft and malleable, and then we'll put the rest of the ingredients in. All right, the cream cheese is whipped. So now we're going to put in a teaspoon of lemon juice. The recipe calls for lemon zest, but I'm going to call a slight audible here and just put a little bit, just a tiny bit, because the extract goes a long way of lemon extract. And now we're going to mix that a little bit more, and then we're going to start adding our confectioner's sugar. So this calls for 6 cups of confectioner's sugar, and to be added in gradually over time. So I'm not going to make you watch me do 6 cups gradually over time and listen to this thing, listen to the stand mixer beat the icing. But I'll go ahead and put the first batch in there and get it started, and then I'll do the other 5 cups gradually, and then I'll show you what the finished product looks like. All right, here is our finished frosting. You can see it's nice and stiff peaks, but nice and fluid. So I've got a pastry bag that I'm going to fill up with this, and we're going to use this to do the inside layers fillings of the cake next. Okay, we've got our cake layers and we're ready to assemble everything. So we're just going to use a little bit of this. You really can overdo it, so don't use a ton, but we're just going to use a little bit of this grapefruit syrup here to just, this will help keep the cake moist as well. I'm going a little too light here.
Okay. And remember, we're going to cut this crust off later, so that's fine that it is not going all the way out to the edges at the moment. All right. And then you definitely, when you cut cake layers like this, you definitely want to fill it with a piping bag and not fill it, but with like not fill it with a not fill it with like a cake knife or something like that, and try to spread it, because you'll end up with just crumbles everywhere. And as these compress, you'll see that the gaps will fill in here. And I'll try to fill them in a little bit myself as well here. Once the cake is all together, this will all become a single layer. And remember, these layers are going to be pretty thin, so you don't want to go nuts with the filling between each layer here. They're going to if you look at the pictures of what the restaurant version looks like, it's a thin layer of cake and also a thin layer of icing in between each one. So, okay. Now we're going to put our next layer on top of that. And definitely have this help you if you need it. Just gently, very gently press it down to get that filling all enmeshed there and fill those air bubbles out. And then we're just going to do the same thing each time. We're just going to add another layer of grapefruit. We're going to add another layer of grapefruit syrup each time. And another layer of frosting. So I'm going to go ahead and finish assembling this, and I will show you guys where we're at once we finish the assembly. All right, we have our cake layers assembled, and now we're just going to frost the outside of the cake. In much the same way, we will coat it in layers of icing, and then we will use a cake knife to spread it. But you want to get a layer on there first so that you don't end up with, if you try to do it just by applying it directly with a knife, you'll end up with crumbs all over mixed into your, it'll pull up, it'll do a whole bunch of undesirable things. So yeah, I'm going to continue doing this and getting it all frosted, and then I will see you guys at the next step. Okay, I finished icing my cake, and I also put a thin layer of the grapefruit glaze on top of it as well, to sort of mimic what you get in the restaurant. It looks like a very plain cake at the moment, so we're going to chill it in the refrigerator, and the real beauty of this cake comes when you slice it. So then the final product here will be when I add the garnish and slice it. Okay, here is our completed cake slice. I garnished it with a little more of the grapefruit syrup as well as a slice of fresh grapefruit. And sort of the special ingredient I mentioned at the beginning of the video was a candied orange that I cut so that it fit on top of the cake. All of the elements came out really good. I tasted them as I went. The cake batter was good. The frosting was good. The glaze was good. Definitely encourage you, if you've got, it does take a little time, but I encourage you to make this one if you ever have the inclination to bake something fancy. So, enjoy it. If you enjoy my videos, please like and subscribe, and I'm going to dig into this, and I'll see you at the next one.